Welcome to the Greenleaf podcast. Today we're excited to have our friend Vlad with us today, and we're going to dive into some conversation on software, the Southeast, and how it impacts really small companies like ours going forwards. So
Vlad and I met a couple of years ago through a mutual friend, and we just banged our heads together, like talking about deals and business and life and kids. He's got a couple of kids, I got a couple of kids, and
you're selling it short between the two of us. I think there's 7.
Who's winning?
There's 7, yeah.
Oh, Josh, you're always excited that you kind of bring out that like I'm winning with number of kids things. He always wants to bring that one up so you can just claim that.
He's still jockeying for number 4, so we'll see.
Oh, he's still in the running?
We'll see.
Probably unlikely, but we never know. Crazier things have happened.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks for joining us today, Vlad. So, you got a very interesting story, right? And you just would you say it recently came out of an exit of a company, or?
Yeah. So we the previous company was acquired in June of 22, and I left at the end of 22. Took 18, 19 months, getting close to 20 months off, and now about to dive back into a new one.
Yeah. When the business you sold, what was the purchase? Who was the purchaser, or what was that purchaser like?
So it's interesting. We were sort of rocking and rolling. We had gone the more, I don't know if you want to call it, the more traditional path of the venture-backed financing rather than bootstrapping it, and we had closed our Series C in May of 21. We weren't looking for any offers. Out of the blue, we had somebody that showed up and said, "Hey, we'd be interested in putting something together." It was a public company. And we quickly made a few more phone calls and ended up with 2 offers, one from the public company and one from a private equity backed one, and ended up, for a host of different reasons, from a fit perspective, ended up going to the private equity route, which made a ton of sense. So it was actually relatively quick. From first meeting to money in the bank was 89 days, 44 days from signed LOI to money in the bank. So they moved fast. That was part of the appeal.
Yeah, that's if you're going to make that decision, seeing it go. Yeah. What was that like? I mean, you're going from running a business. How many people did you have at the time when you were here?
We were about 150 people full time in a mix of areas: U.S., Mexico, Europe, and Australia. More than 50% was in the U.S., and more than 50% of that was actually in Atlanta. Because we weren't really set up to run a process and we weren't looking for anything, it kind of had to be really quiet off to the side with just me and the CFO, and then brought in the rest of the executive team. But the CFO kind of disappeared off the face of the earth for about 6 weeks, for 4 weeks there during diligence. And so it was a little crazy.
So your deal team was you and the CFO?
Basically.
For the first...
In fairness, it was the CFO calling me then at like 1 o'clock in the morning going, "Vlad, what do you think about this?" I'm like, "I don't know what that means. I guess I should Google it and then figure this out and see if there's something there." Look, we had a very close executive team, and it had taken some time to get there, and we were actually having a great time building, but we sort of saw on the horizon where the business was no longer going to grow at the levels we needed to. We were starting to get saturated in the space that we're in. And so we brought them in, I think it was about a week before we signed the LOI. And so they were a part of the due diligence process as well. Being remote, it kind of allowed us not to have to distract the rest of the company as to why is the executive team randomly meeting here and there throughout the day. So that was a bit helpful. And we were remote because it was sort of a little bit post-COVID time frame.
And you were on 3-4 continents? So people...
Yeah, I guess, no, 3. Yeah, 3 continents, yes. We had about 9 people down in Australia, about 14 and about 14 in Europe, and about 35 down in Mexico. So it was different. A lot of cultural headbanging.
Yeah, in lots of time zones.
Lots of time zones. The cultural stuff I did not appreciate as much until much later. So that was a bit of a learnings.
So what was it like going from running something to then being... Do you consider yourself, you were then an employee of the private equity firm?
Basically. Yeah, there were some interesting stories there. They had swapped out a new CEO coming in, and so because we weren't the only acquisition, there was another acquisition in play, 2 other acquisitions. He wanted to basically go through and interview everybody to figure out what the new management team was going to look like. everyone came into the Boston office, and I've never seen anything like this. I'm not sure I'll ever see anything again, but there was basically 20 people in one room effectively vying for the equivalent of 7 jobs, right? Which was an
wow.
Which
They
was
just put them all in like a fish tank? And we're like,
he wanted to see how people would react, and then over time he kind of interviewed them. And the thing is, he was a smart guy. It took him about 4 days to figure out what the team was going to look like, and so from there it was just more about communication to the rest of the folks.
yeah.
But that was one where I was like, oh wow, you got 2.5 heads of sales here, 2 heads of marketing, 3 heads of HR. This is an odd situation. But it's all right. It worked out.
Were you part of the mix of like competing with someone else for the role, or
I wasn't? I was offered a role to stick around and do something specific there, but it wasn't ultimately what I was. It wasn't going to give me a lot of joy and enthusiasm day to day. So instead, I just helped him out a lot and said, okay, let me do this to the end of the year, and then if you've got it figured out, we'll let you rock and roll. And ultimately, what ended up happening is that even though that business was 3 times our size, he actually took the bulk of our management team and then promoted him to run the combined companies. A couple of whom are still there today. A couple years, 2.5 years later.
Is that operation at all still in Atlanta? Or is it?
It's a mix. Their biggest. The company that bought us is out of Boston. The CEO and CFO are up there, and then the next biggest office is down in Atlanta. They're sizable at this point. They publicly stated 6 months ago that the combined entities are now over $100 million in recurring revenue. So it's a big company, and they've got they're spread Atlanta, Atlanta, Chicago from another acquisition, and Boston are the main hubs, and then they've got people all over the place beyond that, and Guadalajara, which was our old hub as well.
So that 18-month break, that would have been a good time to catch up to Josh.
It was. We did. We had the third one.
You did?
We didn't get the fourth one.
Don't worry.
We had the third one, but I just couldn't quite get to the fourth. I was hoping the twins would have been easier.
So how old's your oldest?
So we've got a 9-year-old, one that turns 6 here shortly, and then a one and change-year-old.
Yeah.
You got the daughter at the end.
I got two boys and a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. 4 boys will be tougher.
So the new concept you're working on starting, right? That you're basically launching like this month, like just out of the gates. How long had you been thinking about that? And tell us about like what it does and how to
Yeah. So so for context, our previous business was what we coined as a vertical SaaS, right? So it's software for a given industry, just like you guys would buy real estate software. We provided software for restaurant chains, specifically in the food safety compliance area, which was very interesting, super sexy stuff. Very very quiet in the back. While we were building the company back in 2019, we decided to make a move up market to go work with the big brands. So Chipotle was a customer, McDonald's, Burger King, Domino's, many of the major brands, right? We were at about 75,000 locations when we got acquired across the globe. When we decided to make the move up market, we wanted to be, the enterprise customers would come to us, the big ones, say, hey, we love your stuff, but you got to have, you got to be compliant from a security standpoint. So instead of, in lieu of answering these long questionnaires, go get a certification. It's okay. So we went through and we did this thing called SOC 2 Type 2. And in the accounting world, there's, I think, SOC 1 or SOC 2 that's also something to do with on the accounting side. Anyway, so we went through this, but as you get to the certification in the back end, you need to buy security tooling that kind of makes sure that you're staying in line with what you're telling the auditors you're sticking in line with. Well, for us, that meant buying 11 different tools from 11 different vendors and spending about $55,000 a year. And my partner and I, who was our head of product and technology, chief of product and technology at the previous company, basically said, look, there's an opportunity for earlier stage companies to consolidate this into a single offering where you still get the tools, but you don't get all the bells and whistles of the super advanced ones, but you don't have to negotiate with 11 different vendors, sign 11 different contracts. You can get up and running with relatively small. At that point, we had 30 people and about 13 in engineering. That's a big distraction for a small engineering team. And so the premise is that it was we had started talking about this probably 6 months ago, and then this time around, actually went out into the market and spoke to 36 potential customers and said, "Would you guys need this? And is this a problem? And tell us what you think." And a few of those turned around and said, "Not only do we need this, like, tell us when you get going. We're happy to be the first ones to kind of beta test that."
Yeah. So you think, you're old. The company that you exited, if you're going to spend $55,000, you can do that if you're a good sized business.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. There's, we've spoken to companies that have growing quickly, barely over, call it $1 million in revenue, and for them to sort of fit the same, like to check all the boxes, they will have to spend $25,000 to $30,000 on the same level, right? So we're going to bring them an offering that maybe will be a little bit cheaper, right? I think part of a little bit less expensive, but part of the big value add will be more about just, in one place, one vendor, not have to deal with the sprawl. I think inevitably as companies get really large, we're talking 1,000 employees, 100+ million in revenue. I think at that point you might go out and buy more specialized tools from the likes of CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Networks, the really big players out there. Yeah. CrowdStrike has been in the news recently for some small Delta delays.
Just a few.
Just a few.
I saw one. It was like a funny meme about how Southwest didn't have any cancellations. They're still running on Windows 3.1, so they were still good.
Yeah. Their software is impenetrable to the
web. Exactly. They don't know what cloud is yet.
They'll get there.
Other than flying through them, but yeah.
No, it's as a small business ourselves, right? So we have 60 people, and we're always looking at how do we implement a software solution that can, the dollars we have to make the biggest impact that we can have without disrupting people, or really disrupt them as little as possible to get something out of the door. So when you implemented that security program and you had 11 different applications, like you had to have multiple people across the whole team working on that just to get it out the door.
Yeah, that was actually the problem. Is that part of the other issue was that earlier stage companies and smaller companies just don't really care about security. Like I wish to tell you that everyone deeply cares about it. Unless you're in a super regulated space or your customers are asking you to care about it, this is not one of your priorities. Your priority is finding the next deal and so on and so forth, right?
Growth.
right.
Growing, like getting to revenue so you can have some positive cash flow.
Absolutely, right. Positive cash flow is not one of those things we know in the tech industry. We do at some point, but not in the early stages. And so what does that mean in practice? It means that most people buying security work in a security organization at a company. So you have a chief information security officer or CISO, and then that individual has security people on their teams. Well, so the process of buying and deploying the software is really set up for those individuals. If you're an earlier stage company, sub 200 employees, you don't have a CISO in place. You probably don't have security engineers in place. And so your average developer, software developer now has to do this. And those individuals are just not used to doing things like this regularly, right? So, part of our viewpoint is we're going to build a better experience for those individuals to be able to deploy the software in their environment or deploy the tools in their environment to make it a little bit easier. But yeah, for us, it was a major distraction. We were very lucky that the gentleman who was running product and technology for us, Tim, had experience with doing this. He had done this 4 or 5 times before at the highest levels, right? So federal government clearance, Department of Defense clearance. So he kind of knew, we were much lower in what we needed to deal with, right? We were keeping the temperature of chicken safe in our app. So it wasn't this was not a...
It was going to hack it?
No, it wasn't a security threat to the health of this country. It would have been okay. So for us, we were lucky on that because otherwise it would have taken us, what took us 4 to 6 months probably would have taken us closer to a year, right? It's painful. It's really small. It's tougher. I don't know how you guys do it. I'm sure you've got some outsourced IT help.
I mean, to your same point though, we don't have 200 people. We don't have a head of security information, and I don't really know. We don't talk to that many people that even do.
No,
right?
They're not in the real estate space.
We rely a lot on our third-party vendors that manage some of that for us. So our tenant information is stored with a big software company called Yardi.
Yep.
Right, and that houses all of our financials, all of our tenant information and documents around that, and we rely on that relationship where they aren't getting hacked. And I'm sure they have security information. I mean, they're one of the largest out there. So we rely a lot on our software providers to be doing that because we can't do it in-house.
Yeah, and you as a customer of those, maybe now, maybe when you were signing the contract or when you go for the renewal, we'll just ask them like, hey, can you just are you guys SOC 2 Type 2 or you ISO 27001? Show me that you've done something that tells me that I don't now need to go do extra work to try to figure out if you're actually staying up to snuff with this stuff.
So when you mentioned the threshold of 200 people, when it's hey, you could probably bring some of this stuff in-house if you're a technology company. When do you think, when you were building your last company, when did it get on the radar that you're oh crap, we got to really start doing this?
Well, it's always driven by the customer. Like, if we were initially selling to small groups and franchises, and the average franchisee that's got 10 stores, it's not really worried about the security side of it, right? But if they need to go back to Domino's and Domino's wants to buy it and they want the approval, of course Domino's is going to say, we need this, right? So in the process of even talking to folks, we spoke to a company when it was the founder and the first engineer, the first thing they did was go get SOC 2 compliance. And I said, why? Well, and they're one of these companies that records your meetings and transcribes them, right? So I'm sure you guys have seen them.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a few of them out there. I'll leave the name out on this one. But the reason for that is that no one's going to take your application seriously if I don't have a big giant check mark that says, I'm going to record all of my meetings, internal and external, and there's not a security check on this. No way. Like Dave and Josh are not going to go for this. I can't propose that to them. So you'll see companies now at 2 employees. Another one that's is building a new grocery point of sale system. No grocery chain is going to take them seriously without the security checkboxes. They're 8 people, so they're going through that now before they even have their first deal in place. So it can happen as early as that, or it can happen a little bit later when you're kind of making the natural transition upwards. Sometimes you'd be surprised. There are consumer technology companies out there today that I know of that are in the low hundreds of millions of revenue, and there are no security things in place because the average individual paying $30 a year for their service,
and they're not asking for it.
Doesn't ask. Now, internally, the company should understand its own risk and go, this would be really bad, even if no one's asking. I should probably put a team together around this. But these people are high in demand and expensive, so you go hire a CISO and 4 or 5 folks on that team, and you're in for $2 million a year, right? And that's not chump change. Right.
Yeah, that adds up. That's for sure. Yeah. But so the new company you're launching right now, can you tell us a little bit about that? What you're trying to do there?
Yeah, so a lot of, as we were kind of talking about earlier, a lot of that consolidation of those tools, security kind of falls into a couple different buckets. There's, network security around the actual physical, Wi-Fi, and folks not being able to get that, and that's a big part of Palo Alto Networks' business. There's also sort of application layer security and IT security. You guys as real estate business, probably more IT security oriented. How are my laptops secured? How's my email secured? That's what matters. Yep. The application security stuff is, how are we building software? Where's the traffic coming from? Are we potentially getting hacked from somewhere? Or is everyone doing the right things that they're supposed to do as a developer side? We're going to focus mostly on the application security side. Lots of different scanning tools for malware scanning, application layer scanning, infrastructure, web traffic, whatever it may be, right? And so we're going to take those tools and we'll bring them together. We are going to use mostly the open source solutions that are out there at the moment, because each one of these could be very expensive to build, on the order of, call it 5 to 10 million. Yeah. So trying to build 10 of them would be very expensive initially. So we'll use some pretty solid stuff that's already been out there, and we're just going to bring it all under one kind of user experience UI.
So a brand new company can come to you and get this basic application up and running from a security standpoint instead of having to go figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
So the individual's name was Tim that you said you started with?
Yeah,
that kind of had the experience all this?
Yeah, so Tim's my co-founder on this one. He was our chief of product and technology at the previous company. And before that, he was CTO, chief technology officer of a publicly traded construction tech company that got bought by Oracle. And they were doing lots of big government jobs, including federal ones in the US. And so you can imagine if the Department of Defense is building a new facility somewhere, that's pretty top secret stuff. Right? Yeah. So there are layers upon layers that you have to go through to get up there. And they were publicly known to also have a Chinese portion, a China portion of their business, which, again, you got to be real careful.
Maybe a little firewall.
Exactly. Right. So, because you need to be careful with all these things, Tim's gone through it, I think, on a handful of occasions and had been talking about this himself. He's like, man, it would be a lot easier if somebody just helped consolidate this at the early stages, right? As you get really large, it's sort of, it becomes almost exponentially more difficult with more employees. Like if you have 10 employees, you maybe have like 10 units of problem in terms of security. But if you have 1,000, it's like 10,000. People travel, they access Wi-Fi networks all over the place. They've got home, they've got work, they've got emails, they've got their phones. Things are just flying all over the place. And so as you get larger, the average enterprise company will have 150 different security solutions in place to manage all of the issues they have, whereas a small one will have 15 to 20, right? And it makes sense because you have very specific needs and very specific patches along the way for these issues.
Yeah, just people all over the place.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't, and you guys read the news just like everybody else. It's not like they're going away. I mean, the Seattle airport was just, under cyber attack. I think it was not a couple weeks ago. And these things happen regularly.
So to oversimplify, the company will be seeing one portal instead of 11 different portals and 11 different contracts and 11 different companies have to work with.
Yeah, it's bundling. Jim Clark, I don't know if you guys ever heard this phrase. Jim Clark was one of the founders of Silicon Graphics and Netscape, said that there's only two ways of making money in life that he knows of: bundling and unbundling, right? And he's right? I mean, like in some ways, either you become a very niche point solution because every bank in the world has this problem and you're going to give them a patch for it, or you're going to bundle everything in one place. And this goes back to the topic we've discussed before of like the software spread, even for small businesses. Like it just doesn't end. We had 150 people and we had 120 software products that you were using. I'm sure with your 60, I'd be shocked if you have any less than 30. It's
we have about if we count them all up, right, of everything that we're using. And
I mean, thankfully, G Suite covers a dozen inside of its own.
It's a lot of them.
Yeah. G Suite's incredible.
So are you guys
from a bundling standpoint?
Are you guys using Google Docs and Google Sheets instead of Microsoft Word? And
exactly.
Oh no, we use both.
You paying for both?
Yeah. So we've got both. And it's some people like one version versus the other one, and you can take PowerPoint, just load it into Google Drive and convert it over. Some people like both.
So this is where you got to consolidate. You got to tell them, listen, it's too much. It's another $12 a month for that. We had some exceptions for our finance team on Microsoft Excel and a couple of people that were working with customer documents in Excel. But otherwise, it was like
Excelling the Google Drive
Sheets
versus Excel.
No, I know. For if somebody's financially inclined, it's night and day. I get it. So they should have the exception. But for the most part, the other problem is too from a security and ownership perspective. If an individual leaves the company, I don't know what you've done with your files on your computer. I can't find those. But at least if everything is in Google Sheets or Drive, I just reassign that from Dave to Josh and move on with life. So it makes it a little bit easier.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have all of those issues on a monthly, daily basis, whatever it could be, to throw it in there. So, but yeah, I mean, we're always looking for ways we can try and consolidate, bundle our services to one person, or how can we go find that one custom thing that's going to make us that much better? We were talking right before, we got started, but even like 6 years ago, we were talking about renter's insurance. Renter's insurance was a huge issue because we'd have tenants that don't have insurance. And it's like, how can we actually get an application that can provide them insurance that isn't a giant pain in the butt, where you used to have to like call and go find it for the tenant. It's like a big pain point where a tenant would rent an apartment and you basically go give them a bunch of homework assignments. And they're like, well, I don't want to do any of this crap. And
do the Lemonades of the world make that easier? Is it Lemonade?
Yeah, now they, Lemonade is big insurance group, but we use Entrata from our property management software, and it's just built directly in. So it was one whole application that essentially became bundled and became easier for us to use, but really impacts our customer a lot more. It makes it easier for them. Listen, tremendously easier.
And in fairness, I will tell you that I think what happens over time is that new methods of delivery, new things occur, and from technology standpoint, right? The mobile era was a big one for the last call it 10 plus years, or 15 years, I guess, at this point. And then all of a sudden, as things start to mature, the companies start to build each other's capabilities. Part of one of the best examples I can think of from our previous business was we were using a sales and marketing solution that was there to like really more to send emails on behalf of all of our sales reps, right? Automated ones. Oh, Dave, let me reach out. It's been 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, and it would just automate that if you hadn't responded. Separately, there was another one that came out that was early and phenomenal on recording sales videos and then giving a play-by-play instruction to the rep on afterwards of, hey, you spent too much time talking. You never mentioned the word price. And so that became a phenomenal tool for our sales leadership team to be able to coach the reps. Now, it would add a lot of time because they'd have to sit there at night and listen to these videos. Well, as both those companies got big, what ended up happening, both of them built the other capabilities. The one that did the video recording started building the ability to send emails and track those in unison with the videos. And the one that was doing the initial email marketing then started to do the video portion of it. And so last I heard, my former company consolidated on one of those, right? And so I think it's, I don't know if they save money, because I'm not sure if they save money in that case, but at least they consolidated. And so I think you see that happen once certain markets and industries mature. It's just sort of a natural kind of movement.
Yeah. So with all this being said, with consolidation and bundling, where do you see this kind of AI movement with all the competition out there right now impacting, one of these sectors?
Yeah. So,
or the lowest hanging fruit. Yeah, that's a broad question.
Yeah. So I think in some ways it kind of speeds this up, right? So. Case in point, the vendor that we used back in the day on the sales front to record the videos was about $100 to $125 a month per sales rep or sales manager, right? Not cheap. There was a company that I've done some angel investments in the tech space, and there was a company about 2 years ago that I invested in that is using this newer AI tech, right, to put together the same offering. Right? Because those guys had to go write it themselves. They were initially out there like 7-8 years ago, and they're doing it for $25 to $30 a month. And the reality is that it's massively impactful, and they've gotten clever out of it. They actually ask your role, and if you're sales, they'll look for price, contract, next steps, right? But if you're in a different position, I don't know, account management, right? They may look for a few different subsets. So like the product is now sort of like moved, like is better able to understand your position, so your job, and give you recommendations from those meetings based upon it. Sure. And I think you're going to see this in a bunch of places. Like we had talked about this like a year ago about being able to extrapolate from signed contracts with tenants. You dump them into a system, you track it in there. Salesforce has it, or whatever you guys use for CRM. Well, now you can turn around and just go, let me just put an AI bot on top of this. It'll extrapolate what I need out of it. That'll make my life easier and maybe make the CRM more valuable, assuming the CRM offers that. Yeah,
we're as simple as using ChatGPT to load PDF files, and it'll read them and spit us out a table of the terms for their tenant. It saves a tremendous amount of time. We hundreds and hundreds of tenant documents that we got. Our average commercial lease is like 50, 60 pages of stuff you got to read through.
Yeah,
hundreds
with addendums and extensions and yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw this. Andy Jassy, who was the former CEO of AWS and now the CEO of Amazon, came out a couple weeks ago and said that they've been using their own AI tech to kind of improve their own code infrastructure. So one of the annoying things with when you're building stuff is 5 or 10 years later it's old, right? And so you got to go back and refactor and clean it up. And software engineers don't like doing this. It's a lot of work. You got to be very careful. It's the equivalent in the real estate world of doing construction on a place while people are living in it. Like, it's not a good idea, right? But you got to get it done. And so he tweeted this out and said they've written their own, using their own AI capabilities, they're able to translate the code from what was old to something newer, if I will call it refactoring. And their belief is they've saved 4,500 developer years from doing this, right? So we're talking on the order of what would be 4,500 software engineers that would have taken this a year to do this, or 500 that would have taken 5 years to do. 700 900 that would have taken 5 years to do this. And so I think that's
it's a tremendous, and it's also
unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
People weren't super excited about doing.
No one wants to do it. It's not fun, right?
Yeah.
And all we're joking about Southwest and not using their technology. This is the way Southwest can move forward. Right, that you go drop it on your old Windows 3.11 stack or whatever it is that I don't even think you built something, and then improve it from there, right?
Yeah.
Note: I'm not a developer, so you should never take advice from me as it applies to how to write code.
It's pretty interesting though.
So since Andrew's not here, a question about Captain D's. Did you ever do any business with Captain D's? What are your thoughts on Captain D's?
We tried. We couldn't break into the account. We had a few conversations with them, but
he's their number one customer.
What, was it the temperature of fish versus chicken? Like, you just couldn't translate that over, or?
I think the chain seafood places are difficult. I mean, Red Lobster's gone through bankruptcy now, right? Long John Silver's, I think, went through bankruptcy once or was close to it. Captain D's is out there still.
They're still going.
Who else is there? Anyone else?
I think
We
just covered
went
it.
to a lobster place this summer.
Yeah, Maine, claws.
Yeah, the claws.
I was going to say, we had a customer, or I don't know if my Zenput's, if they're still a customer of Zenput, but Luke's Lobster was a great place that I really liked. They had like, I don't know, maybe 12 or 15 locations. You go in there and get a lobster sandwich.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not cheap. It's whatever it is,
Yeah.
$20, $25. And you got to be very careful running that business. Obviously, folks can get sick very easily, but it's tough to scale those things.
Yeah.
Really tough. Also, the average consumer just doesn't think about fish as fast food. So, like, you got to find the right spots where this works. Where people are like, what I feel like today? It's like middle of the day, a $45 lobster sandwich. It's just like, that's not happening.
Prepared in 90 seconds.
Yeah, that's not happening in Iowa.
Through a drive-through.
Right? Yeah, through a drive-through in Iowa with all the garlic butter on it.
Yeah, that's very true.
So before we wrap here, you went to Georgia Tech. You guys had a pretty big win overseas, over in Dublin.
We did. It doesn't look as good after last night.
No, I didn't see that one.
Florida State got smashed by Boston.
Oh,
College.
yeah.
So now our win doesn't look that good at all.
So Texas is playing Michigan this weekend. I'm pretty pumped about it. I got my shoes, got my shirt on.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big weekend. So if you're watching on Saturday, put your horns
for
up.
Michigan or for
No,
Texas?
we're doing horns up on Saturday.
Okay.
The good thing of having a guy at a school like this that always expects them to win every single game is every once in a while you can root against the other team or root for the other team and get it right.
Yeah, I mean, look,
But they've been doing better lately.
Yes.
Michigan won the national championship last
They
year.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Texas is still. You guys are getting back on your feet.
Yeah. Back on our feet.
Well, you guys were good last. You had
Yeah, I mean, we're a top 4 team.
yeah.
Played horribly against.
Top 4?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
I mean, we went to the playoffs, lost against Washington.
Oh, okay.
Sucked. Yeah. I was there.
Yeah. Sore subject.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Well, good luck this weekend.
Yeah.
guys. Cool. Well, Vlad, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate the time.
Of course.
And,
Thanks for having me.
yeah. Thanks, everyone.